Okay, all right. Holy moly. What a freaking weird morning. What a weird bounce around, craptastic. Like, man. Welcome to the feedback loop. It's Thursday. It's the weirdest of Thursdays. We actually have a pretty busy feedback loop. Rebecca, thanks for chiming in. Rebecca knows she knows a bit about what I'm going to explain here in a second. But, wow, this is going to be like a rather full feedback loop because I haven't had a chance to clear out the queue. Normally, when students send their work in, I like to jump in and try to clear it out as fast as I can. And I was like right in the middle of working on Kara's feedback. She sent over her observational research, so good job, back on track, Kara. And then it was like 11 o'clock at night, and somebody's like, I'm like, who the hell's knocking on my door that aggressively at 11 o'clock at night? And I had heard knocking elsewhere in the hallway. I live in this block. This building's an old industrial building, and it's about a block long, 4 stories high, a block long. And I heard knocking all up and down the hall. And I was like, okay, so some drunks in the hallway or something. So I pop out, and it's a cop. And I'm like, can I help you? He said, fire. We've got to evacuate the building. And sure enough, I smelled smoke. And I looked down the hall, and it was smoky. And I'm like, holy crap. I'm in one of those TV dramas. Probably Chicago Fire, which comes on some random night on NBC. I know what channel it's on. I've just never seen it. Odd fact, the actual firehouse in that show happens to be right around the corner. And as you'll soon find out, that's how the entire building didn't go up in flames, because they were here in 30 seconds. So last night we had a legit fire, and that pretty much blew up any progress that we were making on getting the queue cleared out. So if you are waiting for feedback from me, you're going to receive it in the feedback loop today, because frankly, that is the best way for us to clear the queue. And it looks like CouchBot has announced to the group that we are here, which is good. So we're going to go through a few things today, but the fire was legit. The house was smoky, and everything's aired out now. You might hear a little bit of background noise today because the windows are open. But when you go through a situation like that, here's a few helpful tips. Don't go looking for crap. Just get out. The first thing I did was I grabbed my computer, because how am I going to have the feedback loop? How am I going to get feedback if I don't have my computer? So yeah, I took my computer with me. But I also was looking for random crap, oh, I need my phone, and no, just leave. So that's my feedback for you on life. If there's a fire, just freaking leave. Luckily, thank you to the Chicago Police Department. The Chicago Police Department is right across the street from our building. It's not right across the street. You cross the street and there it is, but it's within eyesight. So it's diagonally from our building. One of the police officers happened to see that the building was on fire before anybody called. Likely, had they waited for a 911 call, which I'm not sure if it ever happened, there's no telling what would have happened. So Chicago PD, for everything for all the crap that I've probably given you over the years, or that people give them, I do think that when something positive goes down, you got to get credit where credit's due. And this being a 115-year-old building, I'm kind of sentimentally attached to the fact that it's not burned down in the prior 115 years, and I would like to keep it that way. So thank you, Chicago Police, 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 Police. Let me check in on that. I am curious. I just want to make sure that the video is not blowing up on us. Thank you for the heads up there, Rebecca. Rebecca's chiming in for us. And well, so to open up the YouTubes, I'm gonna watch myself for just a second. Yeah, it looks like we're fine. According to the live stream, we are fine. So I'm going to get rid of that. We'll come back over here. Yes, now it's working. Thank you, Rebecca. Yeah, I was excited, so maybe YouTube freaked out. We are live streaming on YouTube. We do that every morning. If you have questions, feel free to throw them into Discord. That's exactly how I found out that there was a little hiccup in the video. Thank you, Rebecca. Looking at Kara's journal, when we do observational research, this is like the first cut of the research cycle. And I want to kind of explain how this works because I've gotten questions from people before. And to explain this, I'm going to kind of come over here to Figma. I'm not going to draw in your project. I'm not going to draw in your Octa project, I promise. It just happens to be open. I'm just going to draw over here for a second. So when we do research, I want you to think of research as like a circle, okay? And in this circle, there are lots of holes, all right? So, and these holes can be literally anywhere. I'm just going to kind of color these so we can see them because it's important that we have the ability to do something here in a moment that will be fairly significant. It looks like a weird pepperoni pizza right now. I'm going to go ahead and merge that, and then I'm going to subtract it. Okay, so this is like our first wave of research, Kara. So this is like our observational research layer. So I'll just make it that color. And I want to create another circle to represent our actual project. So our actual project is like this. And if we send that to the back, if this is our observational research, and I want a brighter color, you can clearly see that like we're not covering everything. We're developing a lot of assumptions by watching people in their environment, but we clearly have areas of our research that are going to need more research. So when you come through and you begin doing stakeholder interviews, I want you to think about this as like turning that wheel. I'm going to multiply this, and let's go ahead and make it green, okay? Anywhere that you can still see through is a gap in your research, all right? But you'll notice that between these two, like if I hide that, you have filled in significant gaps just by doing, let's just call this one observational and then let's call this one stakeholder. So we've got our observational research, our stakeholder research. If we do another layer of research and we turn it again, what you should notice is that the number of places that you see all the way through diminishes. Like the pure white here goes further and further away. And areas that are getting darker are where you have confidence around the data. So as you do more and more research, you get more confidence. So this would be comp analysis or comp research. And as we'll find out here in a moment, Luigi is now over in survey land. And at each layer that we go, the further and further down that we go, the more we're filling in our gaps. And there's always going to be gaps, okay? You're never going to be 100% full. But when we begin diving, we'll call this comp testing. When we begin diving into user interviews, that's where we can begin to target areas where we know we have a discrepancy. And where we know we have a discrepancy, we can just interview in a few of these blind spots. Now, does that mean that we're always going to cover everything? No, there's always going to be gaps in this research process. But what I want to explain is that as you're going through this, where you start off like this with your observational research, as you layer on different research types, you begin to fill in those gaps. Okay? So, and everybody's research will look slightly different. For instance, I know that Luigi did, like he went to 2 different places for observational research, as did Eve, and both of them documented every single shopper they went through because they were there at slightly slower times. Kara went at a time where it was very full. Like it would have been very difficult to keep up with the velocity of shoppers, because the velocity of shoppers during one visit that Kara had was 2 visits for Luigi. So he had kind of his had spread out. Luigi was there twice, but Kara watched twice as many people go through in a short amount of time. These different approaches are always going to be they're always going to be how you fill in. Okay, so if you don't feel like you got a lot of information out of observational research, that means you're going to be leaning more on the other research methods to fill in the gaps. And not only are we filling in the gaps, you're looking for, where we have these overlaps where you have the purple and the red. That's where you have found, like these areas. This is where you found confirming data. Okay, the confirming data is saying that, oh, hey, I saw that I recognize that from the observational research, and I'm hearing that from the stakeholders. I'm now seeing that data from 2 separate sources. That doesn't mean the data is true necessarily. That just means that you're hearing it from a couple of different places. You still have to do the analysis to determine whether that is what you need to follow. But that's the research method pizza, and I wanted to mention that because Kara, you had some questions about, I wasn't able to keep up, and is this good research? Is this bad research? My take is always it's a layer of research, and if we come back over here for just a second, and if we say your research pizza here, let's say that your research pizza, you felt like you didn't get a lot out of that first wave. Let's just pretend like this is your first wave, and for you, let's pretend like there's a big gap here, okay? And I'm going to subtract that. your research pizza has a big gap in it. Okay? That means it's going to be really incumbent for you to try to fill that gap in the other areas. And that's fine. Just know that that's why we have multiple layers of research to fill in these gaps. So even if if let's pretend, for instance, you didn't get a lot out of the stakeholders. Okay? The stakeholders were buttoned up. They seem to be not quite fully participating. That's okay. You can get that information other places in the research process. Or, let's pretend like you're in a very shielded market, where you can't really see clearly into the competitors. That's okay. There's other ways. You can talk to users, okay? You can talk to stakeholders who know the market better. You can do observational research. There's other ways in. All right? So, that's the research pizza, if you will. Let's jump over though, because I know Luigi just sent his in, and I want to take a second. Oh, by the way, this is the salary satisfaction for designers. The difference between being completely satisfied and having a decent salary. It seems like the further up the scale you go, they're saying satisfaction and salary are very far apart. This is a study from AIGA, and it's saying that to be an illustrator is where you get the most satisfaction, but your salary is really low. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. It's saying that UX design is here, and it's saying UI design is here. There's something interesting about this, and it is that this is coming from an organization that's focused on graphic design. So, of course, the people that are taking the survey are going to lean closer to packaging design and illustration than they are going to find real satisfaction out of UX design and solving problems. These are artists, okay? That's why illustration is so high. But this came across because it was part of the design census. I don't really think that this has anything to do with design. I think this might as well be called the art census. AIGA is not an American Institute of Graphic Arts. AIGA, piss off. Stop asking questions about UX. You don't understand the space. Mike Montero beat the living crap out of your organization and ruined by design, and now you're mad about it. I have nothing to say about AIGA. I'm sure they're fine, but I hate surveys like this because they're not representative of the user experience or the digital side of design. It's a bunch of illustrators saying I love what I do, but I'm not paid enough. So, and that's why I'm not going to be sharing the design census in this week's newsletter, because I just don't think it applies. I don't think it applies to digital designers. So, with that, off it goes. Let's go ahead and jump into Luigi's work, though. Luigi sent his over just a bit. So here we are. So Luigi, it says here, and again, I just am digging into yours, just like everybody else. It says you got a survey link here. Now it says we're conducting research on food delivery service behaviors and preferences. The survey should only take 5 minutes. Your responses are completely anonymous. Following the survey, we may wish to contact some of the participants to learn more. We request your permission to do so before starting the survey. And could you please add your name and email in that section? So there's a couple things here, Luigi. That piece, I really want to get a can I contact you question in there, and I want to have them click yes. Okay, um, because it's very easy to gloss over the introduction, and because it's very easy to gloss over the introduction, I'm worried they're going to miss that part. I'm worried they're going to miss the opt-in. So for me, I always want these surveys, at the end it's like, can I contact you with follow-up questions? Yes, no. If when they click yes, okay, can I have your email address? It's very much part of a process that they have to physically, like, they have to push a button. I guess not physically, but they have to literally push a button. And because they have to literally push a button, they know what they're doing. If it's just in that intro, I'm worried they're going to miss it. Also, keep in mind that as I've stated, if you've not been through the checkpoint or the chapter, as I've stated before, these surveys are really intended to be opt-in and sort. They're meant to sort out a crowd. You're building a research cohort. So there's a few things that I want to mention right here. First of all, you're beginning with address. This has nothing to do with meal delivery. Okay, it has everything to do with them. So you're going to get a lot of people bounce out because I came in here to give a meal delivery survey. Why is the first question here my address? All right, start with a question specifically related to meal delivery. I'm going to go ahead and answer because I'm a nice person and I just want to see how this is going. IL, and don't spam me, people. Okay, fine. Next. How often do you use a food delivery? Have you used a food delivery? Yes, I have. No, I do not. How often? I don't know. A few times a month. What method? Website. Do you have a preferred? I'm just gonna say Grubhub. Have you used? Yeah, actually, I have. Would you consider a meal delivery subscription service? Sure, why not? So those are all fine questions. I want that address thing isn't necessary, or I want a literal question pertaining to, can I contact you with follow-up questions? Yes, no. And if they say no, that's fine. You've got survey data, okay? You probably won't do a lot with that, but you've got survey data. If they say yes, then you just grab their email. But you want them to be aware of what's going on, and you also want to make this very much about food delivery and about the meal. The topic of the survey is really important because it telegraphs whether you're trying to bilk them for information or you're just trying to collect their personal details. A lot of people are worried that, why are you collecting that information? Why do you need my address? Why do you, zip codes and all that? So that's long story short there. I think that once you get into the survey, you're fine. I'm just going to hit done just to see how this wraps up. Okay. Once you get into the survey, Luigi, you're fine. But I would really recommend flipping that to be more focused on getting to the survey and authenticating whether they are somebody you want to talk to further or not before you say, hey, I need your address. Because if they answer, no, I've never had any of this stuff and I'm not interested in a meal subscription service, who cares if they gave your email address? Who cares if they opted in? That they probably are not a fit for at least the scoping. Now they might be a fit if everybody says no. If everybody says no, then you need to really focus in on, well, why are these people so averse to this idea? But by and large, if they say no quite a bit, and then they give you your email address, that's fine. You probably aren't going to really act on that anyway. So from here, I need to take a short moment. The other thing that's really interesting about fires is how much freaking smoke gets in the building. You know, I've had kind of a respiratory thing for a couple of weeks now, and it was literal hell trying to clear out all the smoke that was in the hallway. I had to open up all the emergency exits and try to vent it out that way. Don't, another tip: if there's a fire in your building, don't open the windows in your unit, because typically it will suck in the smoke into your unit and pull it out the window that way. Try to force all that smoke out the emergency exits. That way your actual living quarters isn't just covered with smoke. All right. So let's go check out Okta, and I know that Rebecca is in here. So Rebecca, this is really clean. Like super duper clean. I'm really liking the direction this is suddenly taken. I do think that it begins to float around a bit, and is maybe this is where, this, if this was a little transparent like it is down, like right down here, you've got this little bit of transparency, which is interesting. I just wonder if like you extend that to here, and I'm just gonna well, that's a stroke, I don't want to do that, but if we said 70, that's a bit much. But if you said 90, like, you get this idea now that there's something back there, and if you did the same down here, that might be an interesting way to approach it. But you've definitely made some big moves here, so I think that's interesting. I'm gonna double click on. I'm gonna try to get that right back where it was. But that isn't the biggest of our questions this morning. I also like the update you have here for Silly Candy. That feels a lot more refined. This has a little Pankill Ministry gradient feel to it, so that's kind of fun. Also, like you have really simplified this up. I mean, look at how clean this footer is by comparison to the purple that you had yesterday. And of course, I'm in case study land now for a second. Yeah. So you've really cleaned this up. I feel pretty strongly about the direction that you've gone now. So I want to take a second to kind of walk through some of the things that I'm looking for specific for you when we get over into code. And what I'm looking to do is let's go ahead and hop over into terminal, because yesterday I had walked through kind of the basic setup of Featherlight, and I had Feather Test here, so you can see, and this is directly from yesterday, I just cloned over git clone the GitHub repo that we wanted, and then I put this into a folder called Feather Test. I'm going to go ahead and open up Feather Test so that we can take a look here. So that's not what we want. Let's go ahead and open up Feather Test. And here in Feather Test, we have some really simple Simple stuff. So this was your problem solution statement. And I'm going to go ahead and turn on word wrap so we can kind of see everything. And I'm also going to go live. And here is the problem and the product as it's stated over here on, well, let's see where your Figma file is. Okay. So it's problem and product. And problem product is the opposite in structure from overview. So I'm going to go ahead and pull in the overview as well. Let's go ahead and let me organize my screens here just a bit. It seems like I've got things that are quite far apart here. So here, this is the problem and product section. I'm going to go ahead and close that, and I'm going to just name it problem product. That wasn't what I wanted. All right, so that section's been created and named. Let's go ahead and work our way up to this would be overview, I believe. So overview, I wanted a to-call write, and when we do to-call write, it will flip it around. So to-call write basically just says I want a narrow column to the left and a wide column to the right. So it's flipping the orientation. And now I want to go in here and just copy this basic information. I want to get all this out so that we can work with it. So we're going to say overview. And now we've got that first bit of information, and then second bit of information. And this is all going in the first column, okay? And here, I don't want that second image, because that image is basically saying you're going to go into your own column. And actually, we're going to get rid of all the images because there's no images in that section. So now we'll come in and we'll get the duration and the comp analysis. So we'll say so there's the deliverables. Here we've got, I believe this was duration, and I think you had like 6 weeks. Save it. So now you've got overview, and you see that this is a column and that's a column, and then there's the elements below. You might be wondering to yourself, well, that isn't exactly how I had it structured, and that's fine. You're completely right. It's not exactly how you had it structured. We're just trying to get it into the HTML because this is in fact responsive. If we begin squeezing this around, we need to go through and get rid of that black because you can't see anything. So I'm going to go into the grid, and we're going to lose this container background of black so that we can see that you can see how that moves around. It stays in a single column, and that's fine. One thing that we want, if we go back and look at your structure, it looks like each of these sections want to have some definitive space to the top and bottom, which is fine. I'm going to go through and create a style and I'm going to call this in the style sheet. I will call it section space, and I'll now come through and I'll say margin will be 3 rem. That's top and bottom, nothing to the sides. Okay. So now if I come back in here and I say, okay, to call right section space, what we should do is we should begin to get space to the top and bottom. And sure enough, we have. Let's just copy that section space. Well, I didn't mean to do that. Okay, so we got section space and section space. And now we're beginning to get a little space around these elements, which is helpful. The next thing that we want to do is we want to determine what is the desired width for this. Right now, looks like you have a width of 780. And if I just go through and really quickly look at this, this is like a full 100 or so wider than that. So what I would do is I would adjust the grid here to say, hey, you know what? I want the width here on the container to be 50. And at 50, this has now become closer to the size that you actually have. And now we can begin looking at possibly, hey, why don't we style up this label, for instance, because we're using the same label, it seems like throughout. It's just an H2. So if we just said H2 class label, and go ahead and bring that class down. You may even be able just to get by with targeting the H2s, but I'm using label because I'm not quite sure. I can clean that up later if I need to, but I'll say label, and now I'll say, you know, font size. Let's go ahead and say 2 rem, actually 2.4 rem. I think that was the size that you had. And let's refresh. Just change that to 24 pixels, not 224. That'd be huge. Okay, so now you're getting closer into the realm of what you had. Another thing that we probably want on this is a little margin bottom. Let's just say 20 pixels. And now you're beginning to get some spacing in there, which is important. As we're working through this, we want this to begin to snap all of our sections together so that we can go through and begin applying our styling section by section. But first we need all of our content inside of this. So of course the next thing I'm going to do is go, okay, well, let's go ahead and get design process in here. And design process, if we look at it, it doesn't really live in a section. It doesn't have like a 2 call right or 2 call left. It just kind of goes across. So I'm not going to put it in a section. I'm going to give it an H1 because it's definitely like big label. So we'll put that in H1. It's still within the container. All right. And because of that, it's gonna continue to align properly. We'll go through and style it in a minute. But now let's go ahead and create a section for the competition. And really, the competition, surveys, user personas, user stories, these are all pretty much one column experiences. So I'm not completely certain that you need to utilize a grid anywhere because everything's just one column all the way down. So in these instances, except for this, and this you may require to go through and do a little bit more work. For these, I'm just going to, create sections. I'll say section, and this will have an H2, and inside of this actually will have a P tag. And inside of that P tag, we've got this. And now we'll come through and we'll say H2. And in the H2, we have the competition. And inside of the competition, we'll drop that H2 in. And as you can see, we continue to go down. Now you might wonder, oh, well, why is the competition so much larger than the product? And that's because we do not have the class of label on it. Again, you could target the H2s if you wanted to. I'm using label because I'm not quite sure what I'm going to use all those H2s for. I'm going to go ahead and call this one class equals main label, I guess, because it's over so many things. And for that, I'm going to create a style called main label, and that will be, let's take a look at what you had there. You had that at 30, and it was regular, and it was all caps. So font size 30 pixels, and I could be using rims, but I haven't really bothered to set that up here yet. Font size, text transform uppercase, border bottom. I know we had a really thick bottom there, so I'm going to say 10 pix solid, and I'm just going to put a gray in there for right now. And then margin bottom, because it was pushing away from the bottom a bit. And margin bottom, let's just say 30 pixels. Let's see what we got here. Yeah, and we've got poppins. So font, family. I'm just going to say sans serif for right now. We can pull poppins in a little later. And again, we're beginning to get closer to what you've got here. But this is really how I would want to begin structuring this file, so that as you begin to write your HTML and CSS, you've got all your content to work with. Right now, I've got a very small amount of content in here, but it's representing overview, the problem, product, and now your design process. You can see we've got a lot more information to pull in. So that's what I would hope to see from you over the course of the next day. Don't worry about styling. The thing that I want to see out of you is I want to see you pulling content over and beginning to get like these images. These images need to make their way over into the project. Also, what we need to do is we need to be able to push this project up somewhere. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically walk you through. We showed in yesterday's video, we showed how to pull it down from GitHub. Now I want to push it back up. All right. So I'm going to go into VS Studio Code, and I'm going to open up Terminal. If you don't want to use VS Studio Code, you can just use Terminal just on your machine. It's fine. So this feather test is on a master branch. I'm going to say git status, and you can see I've updated. I'm going to just blow up my screen here a little bit. I've updated grid, style, index. I create it. It says it's got an untracked file in here, and that's fine. Do not have to track those files. It does have a git ignore, and I'm not sure if VS Code is part of that git ignore. It doesn't look like it is, so I may have to add that in to make sure we don't start tracking those files. But I'm going to say git add. Let's check status again. Yeah, I'm gonna go through and clean that up. But now we'll say git commit -m, adding content to case study. Git push origin master. And it pushed that to feather frame, and I'm not sure why. I'm not exactly sure why. I think it's because, let's go check feather frame. We may have to roll that back. Because when you clone a repository, it updated the starter. That's not what I wanted. And I'm wondering if it's doing that because I'm working from it. So let's do this real quick. It's been a while since I have I've had the issue of starting a project from scratch. But the good news here is you can actually go in and grab what I just did off a feather frame because I've improperly loaded it. Oh no, you can't see what? Oh God. Oh, I did this entire show like load it in the wrong screen. Like that. That's what you needed to see. Okay, well we're just going to back this up. We're going to back this up. That's frustrating. I did not change screens properly earlier. All right. Well, hey, that's what we do. That's what we record the live show for. But I did have a problem here anyway, which is fine. So I'm just going to I'm going to go through and we're going to delete some stuff away. Actually, I want to have, I'm going to go in here. Let's see. I added those. Let's delete those away. I do not know why this VS Code. Oh, that's why. Okay. Okay. Well, this is helpful to know. This is helpful to know. Yeah, we'll have to prune some of the stuff away. Grid, margin bottom. Yeah. 60 background color, that's fine. Index, yeah, this is where the pain's gonna happen. Let's get rid of all that. By the way, I'm really happy-go-lucky, so never worry about, oh, Chris has got to do it over. It's fine. This appears to be basically where we had it yesterday, and I have to figure out how to, let me adjust this because it turned, the reason I didn't see your message earlier, Rebecca, is it turned off my screen that I'm utilizing my iPad to see the Discord channel, and it turned that off. So let me go through and adjust that because I don't want that screen to ever turn off. I want to always be available to see all the messages because your messages are really super handy. You are like my co-pilot on here. Let's see here, display and brightness. Yeah, let's go ahead and there we go. All right, back to Discord. Discord is my favorite. All right, so we have I've updated this to get it back to close to the final version. Although I am going to go through and open up terminal again because I want to try to get it to ignore those VS code items. So OS generated logs SQLite. I'm going to guess that I should just say .vs code. Well, that's fine, Rebecca. I'm not going anywhere, so just you do you. I'll be here recording. And that's the great thing about Feedback Loop. It's available for you to watch whenever you're available to watch it. So let's get status, get add, get commit, resetting file, get push origin master. All right, so feather frame was updated. And of course, the reason I can push to that is because I created feather frame, which is something I have to be really careful about moving forward. So I'm going to delete that VS Code file. So we'll say get status. Yes. Add. Okay. So that is back to where it was. I want to get. Actually, I'm gonna push this thing around a bit. I'm going to hop over here, and we're gonna say ls-a. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that .git file. That will decouple it from the repo that we've been pushing it to, because I need to push it to a new repo. So get rm-rf.git. And now you see master is gone. So this is no longer a git repo. So now if I say git init, it will reinitialize git. And I need this because I need to push this to a different repo. I do not need this to continue to update FeatherFrame because I don't want these updates to appear in FeatherFrame. So there's feather test. I'm going to say, and that's really all I need to do there. Let's go ahead and ls. That's fine. Feather test is out, so we're good. All right. Fun times. So let's back this up. Excuse me. So let's back this up because we were recording in the wrong frame for a good 40 minutes. But let's go ahead and take a peek at how we can get Rebecca up and running with regard to her Figma file, which is here. So right now, Rebecca has this case study with Okta, okay? And I'm gonna go ahead and structure the top of this so that we've got I'm just gonna have some color coded boxes at the top, and then we're gonna focus on adding content to the bottom, and then we're gonna focus on and then we're gonna push it up to GitHub. Rebecca's just getting started coding, but these are I'm basically putting together some training wheels. And Featherframe is really training wheels. All right, it's a easy file to pull down and then begin populating, populating the your work with it. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a file called nav. I'm not going to create a file called nav. I'm going to create a nav to the top of the project, and let's call this nav. And after nav, I'll have a div, and we're going to call this one class equals hero, and that's going to be where that Okta banner lives at. And then we'll get into the container. Inside of hero, we could in fact have a class. Class equals container, and this is really here to allow. Oh, I forgot a quote. This is really here to control the width of Okta. If I could find the project, there it is. Let's go ahead and put that at full screen. So we're trying to get Okta to basically live at this width. And it looks like, okay, so that's something interesting that I'm noticing. There's not a whole lot else that goes full width all the way down, which is kind of interesting, but we'll look at that in just a second. But let's go ahead and get this nav, color code it so that you know that, hey, I'm going to drop content in here. So I will come over, and I keep messing around with this. I don't really want to. All right, so now with style, I'm going to come into style. We'll say nav. So there's nav, and I'm going to say color width 100%. We'll come in, and then we'll say semicolon, Chris. So width is 100%. Now we're going to say color, our background color. I'm just going to call that green for right now. And then we will also, I really like it if we're in alphabetical order. It's just easier to scan. Background color, let's go ahead and have a height on this. We'll say 100 pixels. It's important to realize is that you're going to get rid of most of your heights because their heights are not responsive. But for right now, it's fine. And now let's come over and take a look at this, and the height is there, which is good. It looks like that we're not something's broken down below because the container is no longer holding width. So we'll have to sort out why that's happening. So let's look at grid real quick. To call right. It's really weird that this is suddenly brokey. Why are you brokey? Section space. Oh, okay. Section space is not there. And that may be why it is being frustrated. Yep, that's why it was being frustrated, because section space had went away. So section space was something I'd written just a little while ago. I deleted away so we could write this again. So this is our nav. That nav looks pretty big, but you can adjust it as needed. I'm going to now create hero, and hero is going to be a lot of the same stuff. So here's hero. The height's going to be 300, and we're going to call this one orange. because I want to make sure that you delete it away and style it as needed. And there we go. So this is top nav. Here's the hero. You could also come in here and instead of using like that, you could say, hey, 50 vertical height, and that's going to basically give me half the window. And there you go. So here's our green, here's our orange. We are now the Bowling Green football team. I need some space around these things. So that's where I had created a style earlier called section space. Section space. And that was just a margin to the top and bottom of, I was just saying 30, 0. Come back over. Oh, well, when you create these things, you actually have to apply them. So now we'll write section space. And here we are. So section space is now in there. We've got some space to the top and the bottom. The adding of content is frankly the most important thing that you can do when you're getting your case study up and running. I'm going to go ahead and close this and label it so that we have problem dash product. So that's a section into itself. Now, actually, I don't want to do it in there. I want it to be inside of the container because I want the container to basically hold for the duration. Now we're going to come through and say, all right, this is a section. And this has a class of, well, before I write that, I want to look at this and see what we've got in your Figma file. So this was weighted to the left. So this is to call left. So this would be to call right because it's weighted to the right. So we'll come back over and say, instead of to call left, I'm just going to copy this over. It'll be to call right, and that's going to give me the flipped orientation. And now we'll come back over to here and we'll grab all the content out. And this is the part where I really like to use templates. But when you're first getting started, I think that templates are more than likely just confusing. So we're going to avoid that, and we're just going to bring over our parts. Now, what you'll notice is that the way that this is designed currently in Figma, everything is kind of like its own disparate little unit. Okay. And when we refresh this on the page, this is going to appear, it appears to be out of order. And it's actually not. This is a 2-column CSS grid. And it's 1 unit, 2 units. And actually, if we go into, I believe we can show that with Firefox here. Layout. So we're going to overlay the grid, and you can see exactly how this is structured. So here's grid unit 1. Here's grid unit 2, 3, and 4. These elements there's a grid gap here between these things. So that's what the 2 is all about. And if I came in and I adjusted the grid gap, and I made it, say, 100, you'll be able to tell right away. I need to do it to the right one. You'll be able to tell right away how that is going to adjust the design. Again, that's in the developer tools under layouts. Most of the time we spend our time looking here at rules, but when you come over and you utilize layouts, that's where you really begin to see a lot in how CSS Grid is working for you. So I'm going to change that back to 20. There's something I was wanting to clean up yesterday, and this is quite common. These things all share some similar structure with one another. I don't know if you've picked up on this, but the only thing that's really different about all these is the grid template columns. So I'm going to leave the grid template columns the same for all the all three, and then just overwrite them for right and center, just to shrink up the amount of the amount of code that I have to work with here, and that cleans it up just fine. So I'm going to turn that off, and we'll come back over. We now need to clean this up so that it appears as proper grid units. So now I'm going to just wrap these. I'll wrap the first two in a div, and I'll do the same for the second two in just a moment. Okay, so now what we should have, I forgot to move that over. Now what we should have was, much like in Figma, we should have UX, UI research and design, branding, copy, and sketch and vision, studio, and app, and Figma in one column, and 8 weeks and the rest of it in the other. And sure enough, we do. 8 weeks previously was underneath. The divs, though, work differently. CSS Grid was looking at each of those paragraph tags as individual items, where when you wrap it in divs, as we did here, now it went from 4 individual items to 2 divs, and that is what we have. So that's great. Let's go ahead and add that label in as well. And we can talk a little bit later about what we want to do about the label, because the label is supposedly going all the way across, and I can cover how we will tackle that, but I'm not going to do it right now. Let's go ahead and give this overview. All right, and there it is. Another big problem that we've got, though, is the size of that label is just obnoxious. It's supposed to be, it's supposed to be 24. Poppins bold. I'm not going to worry about the Poppins quite yet, but I do want to get that closer to the right size. So I'm going to come into style. We're going to say dot label, and now we're going to say, font size 24 pixels. And sure enough, there it is. I do want some margin to the bottom of it too, so I'm going to say margin bottom. Let's give it 20 pixels. And now we're getting some spacing between. And this is all really handy, particularly when it comes down to the mobile size. Obviously, we can't see anything in here right now, and that's why we're going to come through and say, hey, grid, get rid of that crazy all black background color, save it. And now we kind of get a peek in there as to what's going on. You still have your hero unit and your nav. You still have this first block, but it's responsive. You're out of the box with this feather frame. You have a responsive design. Your job is to get the content excuse me, out of Figma and into this case study so that you can begin styling this and begin really iterating day after day after day after day. And once we get this into GitHub, we have an opportunity to begin, hey, let's pull down your code and let's take a look at it. We can do that every day in Feedback Loop. So let's take a look really quickly at, okay, well, how would we push this up to GitHub? So the first thing I'm going to do, all right, I'm going to say git status, and of course it's nothing's been committed yet. Okay, so I've made all these adjustments, but I haven't committed anything. I'll say git add dot, and I'll check status again. It said, hey, all these things have been ready to commit, and that's great. The next thing I want to do is I want to commit. I want to say commit populating case study, because that's what we're doing. We're populating the case study. Now I'll say git push origin master, right? That's typically what we do. And then it says, hey, I don't know where that's supposed to go. That's because we haven't created we have not created a repo on GitHub. So let's go do that. So I'm going to open up GitHub, and Rebecca, I'm going to actually create this just for you. I'm going to create a project here, and I will call it new repo. I'll call it Rebecca test or example. And in this, I'm just I'm going to say a short tutorial from 926 feedback loop. That's public, so feel free to get in there. We're going to create the repo. All right. So I've created the repo. You don't have to create the repo. I was just pulling it down, and you could do that right here. I have to first push it up, though. So I'm going to say git remote add origin. And that's done. And then I need to say git push origin master. And basically what we did is we created a bucket over on GitHub, and we said, hey, GitHub, I'm going to throw some stuff to you. And GitHub said, cool. And then we pushed, and GitHub's now going to say, hey, I got it. And when we refresh, hey, I got it. All right. So from here for you, you would simply come in, clone it. All right. And then instead of loading it there, I'll CD out of this. I will say Rebecca example, and call it what you want. Call it portfolio, port 09. Okay, for September. So I've called it port 09, and it said, oh, I'm sorry, that's stupid. I'd say git clone, and then I'll give it a folder to go into, port 09. So it's cloning that out. So when I CD into port 09, it says master. All right. What you want to do is you want to reset this for yourself. And what I like to do is to say rmrf .get. And this is what I did a little earlier. I want to push this somewhere else. So I just remove the .get, and now I can say git init, and it's respun it up, but it's not associated with any particular Git repo. And that means that now you can work with it without having to worry about any of the updates I'm doing or any of that. This is your repo. So that's my 2 cents on that, Rebecca. I would like to see you go through and take the opportunity to populate the case study. And again, we're just using the index.html here. We will rename that stuff later. It's not something that you have to actually worry about doing right now. The only thing you have to worry about doing right now is getting all the stuff out of here. All this stuff needs to get into your HTML. Okay? And yes, there are way easier ways to do this later. For right now, this is the way that I would prefer you go about doing it, because you are just getting started with HTML and CSS. I do want to keep it as simple as possible. Just writing some plain old HTML and CSS is completely fine. Nobody's going to pick on you for it. A couple of things that I wanted to focus on before we got out of here. Luigi, you have your survey. One of the things that I noticed in your survey was that you have this part here. It says we may wish to contact some participants to learn more. A lot of people in the introduction, they will fly over that. They'll just start trying to answer questions. You can't count on somebody saying that's not an opt-in. That's not a logical opt-in. It's not. I actually think that unless they literally click a button that says yes, you may contact me, I believe that would. I don't think that would stand up. So I want this not only added as a legit like, can I contact you? Yes, no. But I want it to be at the end of the survey. When we went in and looked at your survey a little bit ago, I noticed that you basically lead with that question, and it says I've already taken the survey, which is unfortunate. But you were leading with the question of, where are you and can I contact you? I want to lead with, have you used a food delivery service? I want to get to the actual question that's related to the survey as quickly as possible. And then once people have answered questions, then I'm going to ask them, can I contact you? Once somebody is invested in taking the survey, they are more likely to opt in because they've already invested time. Very few people will go all the way through and then say, no, you can't contact me. So flip that around for higher quality or higher conversion rate. Flip it around for higher conversion rate. Always lead with a question that's related to the survey, not to the person. So that's my 2 cents on that. And I'll leave that note here in your journal as well. I thought the questions themselves were fine. I thought they were good questions overall. I just thought the organization of the survey is probably going to lead to a bit more bounce than you should have. And finally, excuse me, Kara. Let's get back to Kara's real quick. Kara was working on her observational research, and the observational research that was done, she was kind of in a harried location. And there's something that I wanted to bring up related to the pizza of research. All right. I have this pepperoni pizza motif here. When you're doing research, we have multiple levels of research. And the goal of having multiple levels of research is that you can come through and fill in the gaps as you go by approaching the problem from a slightly different perspective. So Luigi and Kara, both, and Eve, have all approached observational research from different dynamics, different ways. Luigi observed 200 people over the course of 2 sessions. Kara observed more than 200 people over the course of 1 session. Luigi had time and had the right frequency to really closely document. Kara was overwhelmed. Although Kara noticed some volume observations that Luigi might have missed in all the careful documentation. Kara noticed, hey, most people are going through the 10 items or less line. So they're buying a lot of small shopping trips, not a lot of giant shopping trips. And Luigi might have had that same information, but it was buried in the details that he'd gathered. It's just a different way of getting at it. Either way, observational research, competitive testing, stakeholder interviews, all those things be damned, you're going to have a situation where you have holes. And when you have holes in your research, it's not an issue of my research was bad. It's an issue of that particular approach to research is only going to fill certain gaps. And I then have to take what I've learned and I have to flip it into a new direction. And here I'm going to make it like a green, all right? And we're going to multiply it down. Well, this is like the stakeholder interviews. So instead of observation, we'll say stakeholders. in the stakeholder interviews, you're asking different questions. All right. And you still have holes here. Like there's still some significant holes in your research. But there's also some areas that have been filled in that were previously unaddressed. And then there's some areas that have gone completely dark. And those areas that have gone completely dark are where you've heard that feedback before, you've seen that, you've observed that activity before, and now you're hearing about it from a second source. This is information that has popped up more than once. It has confirmed its existence. It is not confirmed whether it is right or wrong. It has confirmed its existence. It is your job to do the analysis to determine whether that existence is helpful or harmful to the purpose of your project. But and that's where confirmation bias can come in. You heard it, you saw it in observational research, and then you heard it in the stakeholder interview, and suddenly, oh, I heard it in two places. That's true. No, you just heard it in two places. It doesn't mean it's true. It means that there is a popularly conceived notion of X happening, and it does appear to be happening. I don't know what it means yet, but I've definitely observed that activity. Well, what happens if in these areas that aren't filled yet is we do another round of research, and maybe that's where competitive research comes in. And when competitive research comes in, which oddly enough is also green in this dynamic, you begin filling in a slightly different direction. I'm going to make that yellow so we can see it. And what we should be seeing here in this diagram is that more areas of overlap occur, more areas begin to get filled in, and overall, our methods are leaving us with fewer and fewer gaps because we're using multiple tiers of research methods. When somebody asks you to skip the research, what they're actually missing out on is an opportunity to really find out what it is that needs to be solved. When somebody says, can you just do a little research, what they're missing out on is the opportunity to confirm findings that exist, the opportunity to fill in gaps that will exist if you only do one round of research. Now, you could say, well, Chris, my boss doesn't want me to do any research. What does that look like? Well, frankly, that looks like this. I mean, it looks like you took the entire pizza away and now there's your project. You have nothing but assumption. You have an assumption pizza. All right, and there's nothing on it. It's just bread. All right? Probably not going to taste very good. Maybe you can guess at what to put on it. I don't know. But that's my little bit on research. Research methods are all about filling in the gaps. All right? You want to be able to say, I've approached this question from a number of different angles, and here's what I have. Kara did great. You now have a set of data that will steer the questions that you ask in your stakeholder interviews, and that will steer the competitors that you look at. There is no wrong research, in my opinion. There's only research that builds upon and steers the next wave of research. There are going to be rounds of research that are just kind of duds. I didn't get much out of that one. And that's okay. That means that you hit it from an angle that wasn't productive. UX work is messy. It's not always going to generate positive movement. There will be times where it will generate more questions than answers. But that is why we put in the work. We put in the work so the user doesn't have to. We do the guesswork so they don't have to. So that when they come to use our products, they get a superior experience. So with that, I'm Chris Courtney. This has been a really long version of the feedback loop, but I hope that you have. I hope that you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it useful. I'm going to go finish airing out my smoke-filled home. It's not as smoke-filled as it was once before, but it definitely still has a tinge of campfire. And I will look forward to seeing all of you again tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.